We've warned you for years about the national sexuality standards going all the way back to the Common Core days when no one believed us. The updated version of these sexuality standards will now show graphic pornographic images to little kids that promote abortion without boundaries or time limits. I'd say we told you so if we weren't too busy being sick to our stomachs. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. As you know, we are the only program that keeps you educated out there on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we do want to give a shout out to a new sponsor, Clean Start. As a brand new sponsor of the Dr. Duke Show, Clean Start is a hand sanitizer that is truly revolutionary. It is odor-free, delivered in a foam pump. It lasts for 2 full hours, and the best part, its patent-pending concentrate means you can refill your bottles by adding tap water and just a squirt of Clean Start refill. This stuff is amazing, and as I mentioned, it has no scent. Simply visit FreedomProject.com to get your order. I recommend the hand sanitizer 2-gallon concentrate pack. Makes 19 bottles of hand sanitizer and only costs $45. Again, visit FreedomProject.com to get your order. Clean Start supports this show, so let's show our support for them. Cleanliness is, of course, next to godliness. Okay, today we start with new sex ed standards for public school kids. Well, they're not really all that new. This is the old national sexuality standards that now force explicit images, abortion, and gender fluidity on kids without parents having any clue that it's going on.
Well, we've talked about this many a time, and it's always a good reminder, Mom and Dad, that this is coming to you, to your children. So you should be paying attention. Now, we know that there is a 2011 version. And so they're required to then update this. So the 2020 version is a little different and not at all in a good way. So according to the various 2020 standards, it endorses abortion whenever, because why not?
All 9 months. Yep.
All that, anytime. It teaches, starting in 6th grade, of course. That's when 6th graders need to know about abortion. And it forces teachers to provide information on local abortion clinics, so the kids know where to go. And that doesn't start till 9th grade, though.
Oh, wow.
That makes it better of sorts. Not at all. The standards also insist that the kids be allowed to choose their own gender, as we already know that's happening everywhere, and all the pronouns that they feel like coming up with. And, any pronoun that you choose must be respected by adults in their lives at all times. Now, according to the 2020 standards, compared to, of course, the 2011 standards, just a quick little breakdown. In the 2020 standards, transgenderism and the teaching of transgenderism as being, A-OK is in their 21 different times, where, back in 2011, they weren't very progressive. Only 3 times was it mentioned. And then now in 2020, oh good, gender identity, 69 times. And then only 10 times back in 2011. Just, again, we're so much more woke and progressive than we ever were just 10 years ago. And then if you keep on moving on to sexual orientation, of course, 2011, only 8 times, but now 48. And here we go, gender, because everything is gender and, gender identity, and it all ties in. Now, 270 times compared to 48 back in the day.
And the two that get me, notice the next ones. They only mentioned boys and girls 7 times each back in 2011. Now, 0 mentions of girls and only 1 of boys in the context of princess boys. In other words, trying to turn boys into less masculine boys. So 0 mentions of boys and girls. That tells you everything you need to know. And even they've added 9 references to racism when there was none before.
But I kind of like the abstinence ones, because in 2020 it's 20 times, and you're like, oh, that's only 7 fewer than 2011. But I'm almost guaranteeing if I would go through and look at what it says about abstinence compared to 2011, that's where the real information is, the context of it.
We know what it says. I'll tell you what it says about abstinence. They consider abstinence to be any kind of sex at all. Any kind of sex at all is abstinence if it doesn't result, their words not mine, in semen in a vagina. That's what they rate. As long as there is no semen in a vagina, every other conceivable kind of sex act is now considered abstinence.
Well, and in kindergarten, let's take a look at what you learn. You get to learn about gender identity. In third grade, you get to learn that gender is on a spectrum. We already know that. You get to learn about the role of hormone blockers for transgender youth, because all 7, 8-year-olds need to know about that. And how to explain masturbation, of course. Again, 8-year-olds, masturbation, they need to know. Sixth graders, again, you're 11, you're 12, you must define. Ooh, we're learning. You're going to learn how to define oral, anal, and vaginal sex, as well as the benefits of withdrawing one's penis before ejaculation during intercourse and how to use dental dams during oral sex. Got an 11 or 12-year-old at home, mom and dad? Do you want them learning that? Do you?
You know, I go back to the Common Core. The first iteration of this back in 2011 corresponded perfectly with the rise of Common Core. I remember giving talks across the country and having educrats and principals insult us. I remember our own Wisconsin DPI, Department of Public Instruction, cited me and said, "Pest is crazy. This will never happen in Wisconsin. These standards are never going to be part of what we do." Here we are a decade later, and there they are. And not only are they back, not only are they mandated, but they are much worse than they were even 10 years ago.
Well, before we move on, just a quick reminder that the best way to access our content is to download the Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store, download it, and then make sure you allow for notifications. Also, if you like listening to the audio podcast, we are available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and pretty much, everywhere else. But alas, we must move on. So now I would like to turn our attention, if you will, to New Haven. In New Haven, Connecticut, there's been a whole lot of jumping to conclusions happening because we have an incident of a noose made of a shoestring that was found in a K-8 school restroom. And the superintendent at New Haven School District, just super irate. Here's what Eileen Tracy had to say. Again, a noose made of a shoestring in a restroom. "This is a very serious breach of the values of our community. Such behavior cannot and will not be tolerated. We will work with staff and students to understand what happened and to keep from it occurring again. We will take action to make sure students are safe and all are respected." And then it was found out that the noose in Nathan Hale School was created by a student who attempted self-harm, which obviously is its own sad tale. And the student in question was taken to a hospital. But for a superintendent to release a statement immediately, going off the rails and saying, "How dare this happen? Racism." Oops.
Well, New Haven is no haven for stupidity when it comes to schools. Of course, that's the home of Yale University, one of the more intellectually corrupted Ivy League schools, and we've done a lot of stories about them. But, it's almost as if these superintendents are just sitting there all day long, poised on the edge of their keyboards, waiting for something racist to happen, right? They can't wait. They got nothing else to do.
My turn. When do I get to go? Come on, me
I get
next.
to virtue signal. I get my chance.
Yes.
And not almost every single incidence of these things are bogus. In this case, it happened to be some kind of weird cry for help of a kid who may have been somewhat suicidal. But mostly they're just hoaxes perpetrated by black students. And of course, never do those superintendents come back when the hoax is perpetrated and say, "I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. I apologize to all the white students of New Haven because of it was all made up. It was perpetrated to make you look bad. We owe you an apology. Next time, I promise, I won't jump to conclusions about evil white racism." No, you never hear those things.
Well, but that would admit that they were wrong or something, and we can't do that.
Even racial lies serve the purpose, right? In fact, racial lies gives us even more of a chance to demonstrate how virtuous we are. So keep making those forgeries, guys. Well, it makes us look good.
Yes, I would like to just go down memory lane about a few of these noose incidents and all the fakery that it was. Let's remember the race and the noose. False happenings are happening. Just in June, we had an incident where a loop at the end of a steel construction cable attached to a crane at Central Connecticut, still in Connecticut, State University triggered a number of folks who saw a noose instead. Again, it was a loop at the end of a crane, and it's a steel construction cable. If you know nothing about building, then of course you're going to think, oh yeah, that's a noose. And then last year we've had numerous people, including, well, Governor Andrew Cuomo, then New York Governor. Oops, too soon for that one? Not at all. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo had assumed they saw a noose at Marcus Garvey Park in Harlem, but then the New York Police Department, how dare we say them, the Hate Crime Task Force said it was actually left over from a construction scaffold. Again, these people know nothing about construction whatsoever, and they get all up in arms. Andrew Cuomo.
All they know how to do is deconstruct. But I have a philosophical question for you, Katie.
Oh, okay, fine.
Speaking of nooses, let's say you're at a group of kids playing the game Hangman, where you drop a little...
I don't think we're allowed to play Hangman anymore.
Let's talk about this.
Great game.
I don't think they've actually banned it officially yet. You got a bunch of kids playing Hangman at lunch. Here's my question. In the name of inclusivity, don't they have to make the hanging man black at some point?
And not a man at all.
Or a black woman, for that matter.
Could be.
So in the name of inclusion, don't they have to include African Americans in the hanging? And if they do, does that become a hate crime?
That's a very good question. I don't think anyone plays Hangman anymore because it involves like words and language and unspelling, which is racist in its own right.
Well, I asked the question to show the complete the lack of inherent logic in these rules, these politically correct diktats that come down from the progressive orthodoxy. When you look at them close enough, they're just so absurd, it's easy to deconstruct the lack of logic in them.
This is true. Like the lack of logic. And another example I'd like to just point out from the University of Michigan. At a hospital in 2019, there was a hate crime allegation, and the Office of Counseling and Workplace Resilience was made available for any of those who, they had distress over such an incident, this hanging noose, that basically turned out it was actually an employee who was practicing tying a fishing knot.
In 2015, a University of Delaware student reported finding 3 nooses hanging from a tree in front of a campus building one day after Black Lives Matter activists staged a protest. School president and campus police were investigating this hate crime and argued that, quote, "we need to stand together against intolerance." However, it was determined that the ropes were actually left over from a previous campus activity involving paper lanterns. So add paper lanterns, especially if they're Chinese lanterns, to your list of racist stereotypes that you are not to engage with on college campuses.
Kick out the cops, they said. They're all bad, they said. Bunch of racists, murdering bigots. So again, kick out the cops, they said. And now we have parents who are really upset at a Seattle area high school for kicking out the cops because there was a student who had threatened their classmates with an AR-15 on campus. Now we have our good friend, and by good friend I mean I don't really know him, but Jason Rance is doing all the good reporting out there in Seattle area. And so back in June of 2020, the Seattle Public Schools had suspended their district-wide school resource officer program, okay, due to, as always, the current national events that unfolded, George Floyd. We all know the backstory. So Seattle was one of the first to be like, you know what? You're right. We need to get rid of the school resource officer. So they did that. Well, now here's a current event happening, and it involves the students being threatened with guns. So an unnamed female student threatened students with an AR-15 in the parking lot at Ingram High School, and this just happened about a week and a half ago. According to a student witness, the girl that was in the passenger seat clicked in and loaded in a magazine into the AR-15. The girl and a man were in a car at the school and were yelling at 4 students coming back from lunch. The student witness said the girl then passed the gun over to the driver, who then pointed the gun at the 4, and the driver threatened the kids, saying he was going to kill them. Let's take a look at what the news says.
The girl that was in the passenger seat clicked in, loaded up a magazine into the AR-15.
His son tells him that the girl and a man were in a car at the school and were yelling at 4 students coming back from lunch. He says that girl then passed the gun to the driver, who then pointed it at the 4.
It was middle of the day. Somebody just decided to, who knows?
He says the driver threatened the kids, saying he was going to kill them. Seattle police tells us they responded to an incident at the high school yesterday after there was a, quote, dispute between two groups of juveniles, and that the driver that showed the weapon eventually left the scene. Ingram High's principal sent out a letter to parents today saying, quote, as soon as administration learned of the situation, we alerted the district's safety and security team, and we called 911.
Well, I just like the simple fact that Martin Flo, the Ingram High School principal, in that statement, as you saw, had alerted the district's safety and security team, which I want to know who is making up the safety and security team when, they did call 911 too, but they could have just had an officer on campus right then and there able to help figure out what was going on and keep the kids safe. Because if we would have found out anything actually did happen, then there would have been even more trouble, obviously. But thankfully, nothing did happen in this. No one was injured or anything. But Martin Flo did say, thank you to our students for reporting this matter. Why are the students reporting this matter and not, again, an adult being aware of seeing it, because there should be someone there to watch?
Well, one parent gave an accurate assessment of the situation. Quote, you all should flip out. You should be outraged. You should be pissed out. You should be pissed out of your brain, this mom said, this parent said. If someone's got that kind of firepower in a car, on a campus, pointing at students, this needs to be a much bigger deal than you made out of it.
And we know another parent actually said that hearing that kids are on the property with guns, I want to move my kid away from this region as quickly as possible. Yes, I agree. You should move your kid away from there as quickly as possible.
And it's not a regional issue, it's a public school issue, so move them quick. Okay, it is time for Instant Classics, and the Instant Classic this week is going to be all about the work of Kurt Vonnegut Jr., particularly the short story Harrison Bergeron. Now, Vonnegut is an interesting fella. He is no conservative. He was a man of the left, a deeply rooted man of the left. But he wrote a number of works that really do question authoritarianism, government out of control. He's what you would call a classic liberal. He did believe that America was facing trouble from extremists, but those extremists back then could have been anybody in government. It wasn't just so-called right-wing conservatives. So the men of the left, going back 60, 70 years, they recognized that the threat of authoritarianism could come from the left just as easily as the right. Let's not forget that Nazism and communism were both socialist movements. So if you go back to the picture there, and you can see there's Vonnegut. He actually made some appearances at the end of his life in Hollywood movies. So he had a very varied career. But Harrison Bergeron is his great short story. I think everybody should read it. Read it today if you can. It's a dystopian science fiction short story that was first published in October of '61. Originally published in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, the story was republished in the author's Welcome to the Monkey House collection in 1968. So again, here's what the situation is. It's the year 2081, and the 211th, 12th, and 13th Amendments of the Constitution have been passed. Notice the humor, right? The progressive view of the evolving curriculum. The first 10 amendments, the first Bill of Rights wasn't enough. The amendments to the Bill of Rights weren't enough. We've got 200 plus new amendments in a space of about 50 years, and that's what gets this all messed up. It's not the Constitution anymore. And so the Constitution here is that all dictates that Americans must be fully equal. That means every superficial difference has to be done away with. This, my friends, of course, is equity, right? So tall people wore weights that held them down. Athletic people were also sort of weighted so that they couldn't engage more athletically than other people. Smart people had devices put around their necks that both weighed them down and got in the way of their thought processes. Pulses of energy would break up their concentration, so smart people couldn't concentrate at being smarter than other people. It was just unbelievable how it worked out here. And you think about the logical outcome of equity. This is it. Every single human difference is a discrimination. Every single difference in attitude, ability, height, weight, IQ, skin color, everything has to be accounted for. This is where your progressives are right today. And when Vonnegut was writing about it a long time ago, the idea that this would happen in our lifetime seemed pretty slim. But here it is. Take a look at our quote from today. It's a short one. The HG men, right? The HG men. This is the important idea here. These are the people, the HG people, whose job it is, the handicap enforcers, right? The handicapper general. That's what HG stand for. The men of the office of the handicapper general. Harrison Bergeron turns out to be a savant. He's brilliant. He is way smarter than everybody else. And so something has to be done about Harrison, and he is visited by the handicapper general to fix this for him, to hold him down artificially. In fact, George and Hazel were the mothers of Harrison, and they couldn't think about it very hard. Why? Because Mom was so average, let's call that stupid, that she didn't even require an intervention. Her stupidity kept her at the bottom of the rung. The HG men didn't have to do anything. But the father was pretty smart. That must be where Harrison got his intelligence. And he wore a device that would not let him concentrate on anything long enough to be able to be brilliant. And so what a powerful statement that is. The HG men took Harrison away. His brilliance had to be punished and stunted somehow. But George and Hazel, Mom and Dad, couldn't even have the concentration or the ability to think about it very hard. Let that sink in. 1961, Vonnegut really, back in an age where liberals and conservatives both agreed that tyranny could come from all different political backgrounds.
Okay, those are the stories for today. If you have a question, please feel free to drop it into the mailbag by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org. And if you enjoy our content, please support our show by joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation keeps us moving right along. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And as a special thank you, we will ship you our brand new American Patriot tumbler with the George Washington on it.
And that wraps up this show for Freedom Project. I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.